Hi guys, it's first chapter Friday time, and the book I have for you today is History Smashers, The Mayflower by Kate Messner. Kate Messner is an awesome author who has written the series Ranger in Time, if you know that one, several picture books, one of which Over and Under the Snow, I sent to teachers as a video, so you might have seen that, and that was her reading it. This one I'm super excited about. It's pretty new. I think it just came out in the summer. That's when I got it. And so if you like graphic novels, History Smashers, it looks a lot like a graphic novel in a lot of parts. In fact, let me think here if I can find a good spot that shows you um, more kind of graphic novel-ish type work. There's um, pictures with words in the middle and to kind of tell the story of what's happening. And the other thing is that I like about this, there's also pages that show diagrams and things like that. She's taking pieces of history and breaking them apart in terms of what's true and what's not. And that was another really cool thing. So if you're sort of interested in history, you're not really sure, this might be for you. If you like graphic novels, there's a lot of visual pieces to this book, so I think you'd like that too. So it's first chapter Friday, so I'm going to read chapter 1. And it starts with a little introduction here. You've probably heard about the Mayflower. Chances are someone told you about the Pilgrims who came to America because they wanted religious freedom. You probably learned how they crossed the wild Atlantic, how they landed at Plymouth Rock in Massachusetts, how the Wampanoag people taught them to grow corn, and how they all celebrated by sitting down together for a feast, the very first Thanksgiving. But only parts of that story are true. There's a lot more to the history of the Mayflower, the Pilgrims, and the Wampanoag, so let's take a look at the historical documents, smash some of those old myths, and uncover the real story. Chapter 1. Who were the Pilgrims anyway? If April showers bring Mayflowers, what do Mayflowers bring? The answer to that riddle, of course, is Pilgrims. The joke works because almost everyone knows a little about the Pilgrims. So again, some like drawings and interesting ways to, and look how the the chapter title is a smashed out piece of wall. Pretty cool, huh? We've heard how they left England and came to America in search of religious freedom, but that's not even close to the whole story. For starters, the Pilgrims didn't go to America when they left England. Not first, anyway. By the way, I didn't know that until I read this book. I'm old. The real deal story of the Mayflower begins way back in the 1530s, when King Henry VIII made some big changes to religion in England. King Henry wanted a son who could grow up to be the King of England, too. He and his first wife only had a daughter, though. Henry decided the solution was to get divorced and marry someone else, with whom he might have a son. But the Roman Catholic Church was the official church in England then, and it did not allow divorce. King Henry went all the way to the Pope, the leader of the whole Catholic Church, to argue that he should be able to leave his wife and marry a new one. When the Pope said no, Henry decided to break away from the Catholic Church and start his own. From then on, the Church of England would be the official church of the land. King Henry wasn't the only one who had issues with the Roman Catholic Church at that time. Many complained that Catholic leaders had too much power and wealth, but not everyone liked King Henry's new church either. Some thought it was too similar to the Catholic Church. One group, called the Puritans, wanted the new church to be purified of all the old practices. Other people didn't think that was enough. They were called separatists because they wanted to separate from the Church of England completely and have their own religion. The separatists thought that true Christian believers should come together in their own small churches. They wanted those churches to be independent so members could study the Bible and make decisions on their own. So here's a drawing of King Henry VIII there. William Brewster, who was the postmaster of a village called Scrooby, sounded like Scooby almost, like Scooby-Doo. Scrooby, decided to start a church in his own house. It was a risky idea. Back then, people who didn't follow the Church of England could be thrown in jail. In his book, Of Plymouth Plantation, Pilgrim William Bradford wrote that Brewster's separatists were hunted and persecuted on every side. Government officials were watching the separatist houses day and night. Some of them did get thrown in jail. You can probably understand why leaving England was starting to seem like a good idea. So that's when the separatists set sail for America, right? Wrong. They went to Holland. You didn't see that coming, did you? Holland, which today we call the Netherlands, was known for religious freedom. Brewster learned that a small group of separatists had recently escaped to the city of Amsterdam, where they could practice their religion in peace. That seemed like a good idea, so Brewster made plans to take his group there too. His followers were nervous, though. They didn't speak Dutch. They weren't sure how they'd earn money to support their families. Bradford later wrote that to many of the separatists, taking off for Holland seemed like an adventure almost desperate, and a misery worse than death. But after much discussion, they decided to go anyway. So again, some good drawing visuals here. This, I believe, is William Brewster. So a separatist here, and they're having secret meetings. And then they drew a little map from England to Holland, where the Netherlands, where Amsterdam is. And it's not as far as it would be to go to America for them. So again, graphic novel style. I couldn't find this earlier. 1607, Brewster arranged for a ship to sneak his congregation to Amsterdam. It was expensive and they had to wait a long time, but he didn't see any other option. Finally, the day arrived. It was time for the separatists to leave England once and for all. But then everything fell apart. The ship's captain had ratted them out. The ship's crew ransacked all the passengers' belongings, looking for money. They turned the separatists over to the authorities. Instead of escaping to Holland, they ended up spending a month in an English prison. So this is the part I just read. But Brewster didn't give up. About a year later, he took his group north in England and found another ship. Officials discovered their plan and tried to catch them again, but this time the separatists saw the authorities coming. Most of the men had boarded the ship, and in a panic, they brought up the anchor, hoisted the sails, and took off. The women and children, who hadn't boarded yet, were still waiting on the dock with most of their belongings. English authorities caught the women and children, but then they weren't quite sure what to do with them, since their husbands and fathers were gone. So here are the women and children. Eventually, the women and children were released and met up with the others in Holland. This group of separatists lived in Amsterdam for about a year before deciding the busy port city wasn't the right place for them to settle. It was time to move on. So that's when they left for Plymouth Rock, right? Nope. Instead, they moved to another city in Holland called Leiden. Leiden was a beautiful city with a university. It was also known for cloth making, and some of the newly arrived separatists got jobs in that industry. They worked long hours at looms to weave linen and wool cloth. They would bring their products to the town chapel, where members of the local Weavers' Guild would examine them. If the cloth was judged to be of high enough quality, then it could be sold. Leiden was also home to a towering 12th century castle, whose grounds had been turned into a public park. When Bradford and the other separatists weren't working, they spent time there with their families. It sounds pretty nice, doesn't it? But the separatists weren't very happy in Leiden either. The language sounded strange to them, and they weren't used to the Dutch customs. So again, some good visuals here of maps, so you can get a picture where they are and kind of a drawing of the place. Like Amsterdam, Leiden was a busy, bustling city. Too busy and bustling for many of the separatists. They did their best to make a life there, but it never felt like home. Back in England, many of them had been farmers. They missed the countryside, and their farming skills didn't transfer well to such a big city. Some had trouble earning money. They were also worried that war might break out between Holland and Spain. As the years passed, they grew more and more concerned that their English children were becoming Dutch. Some of the older kids had even run off to be soldiers or sailors. The separatists had wanted to break away from the Church of England, but they'd never meant to give up being English. There had to be a place where they could raise their families with the old English ways while practicing their religion in peace. So after about 12 years in Holland, they decided that the time had come to move again, to a place where they truly could call home. We're talking about Plymouth now, right? Actually, no, not yet. Can you believe it? When the separatists decided to leave Holland, they weren't sure at first where they'd go. For a while, they were thinking about Guyana on the northeast coast of South America. The Dutch had set up a colony there. It was lush and green with warm weather that made it easy to grow food. That sounds way better than freezing cold winters of New England, doesn't it? But the separatists worried that the warmer weather would not agree so well with our English bodies. They feared that diseases would spread easily in the hot climate. So here he's thinking, like, where to go? South America or over here in North America? I think they should have gone south. Another option was to cross the ocean but go farther north. There, they'd be living close to other English people. They worried about that too. What if they were persecuted? What if it felt like England all over again? They'd have gone so far, all for nothing. What should they do? It wasn't an easy decision, but in the end, William Brewster and his congregation made plans to say goodbye to Holland and set sail across the Atlantic. Um, that's kind of the end of the chapter, but then before the next chapter, there's a whole section about how do we know what we know about the Pilgrims? Like, how do they get this information? And so Kate Messner, the author, did a great job of talking about information and where things are found, like a museum in Leiden, the Leiden American Pilgrim Museum. There's an actual place there. So that there's also a lot of other information in this book besides just about the pilgrims. Did pilgrims really look like that? A whole section about that, and what they wore. And then it's the next chapter, Voyage on the Mayflower. So it ends with them getting ready to go, right? And then chapter 2 is going on the Mayflower, but before that, there's some other really great information. So I know that there's at least one other History Smashers, and I don't remember the topic. Oh, it's on the back. Whoopsies. Smash more stories, it says. History Smashers for women's right to vote and also for Pearl Harbor. So if you're interested in World War II era stuff, History Smashers Pearl Harbor would be for you. If you're interested in voting rights, especially for women, History Smashers Women's Right to Vote would be for you. But again, nonfiction, and it's now a series. So she's written several different ones. I want to say there was one about the Constitution too, or the Revolutionary War, something like that. But again, if you're interested in finding a new book, a little graphic novel type with a lot of great visuals, History Smashers by Kate Messner, that one might be for you.